Welcome back to Eject Media. Canada's horror output has always been unique, often smaller, stranger, and colder in tone, with stories rooted in isolation, folklore, and raw creativity. This series is dedicated to unearthing those films, the overlooked, the cult, and the forgotten Canadian horror movies that defined the VHS era in their own way. Tonight we're exploring 10 Canadian horror films that range from psychological nightmares to creature-driven terror. Each one a reminder that horror history isn't complete without the North's contributions. Blue Monkey, 1987. When a mysterious insect bite sends an elderly man to the hospital, doctors are baffled by his rapid decline. Soon, a strange larva is discovered, growing at an alarming rate, and before long the hospital itself becomes ground zero for a monstrous outbreak. Quarantined inside, doctors, patients, and police must fight for survival as the creature mutates into something far deadlier. Directed by William Fruet, Blue Monkey, retitled Insect in some markets, is a Canadian creature feature that embraces its B-movie energy. Steve Railsback leads the cast as Detective Stenning, alongside Gwyneth Walsh and John Vernon, who add grit and authority to the escalating chaos. The effects are practical and gooey, with puppetry and prosthetics bringing the oversized monster to life. Hospital corridors become hunting grounds, while flickering lights and sterile labs add to the sense of containment and claustrophobia. Though often overlooked in favor of bigger-budget 80s monster movies, Blue Monkey delivers the kind of slimy, over-the-top thrills that made late-night VHS rentals unforgettable. Curtains, 1983. A reclusive director invites a group of actresses to his isolated mansion, each competing for the same coveted role. But as tensions rise between the hopefuls, someone in a grotesque old woman mask begins stalking them one by one. What should have been a career-making opportunity turns into a fight for survival. Directed by Richard Syupka, Curtains stands out in the Canadian horror wave of the early 80s. John Vernon plays the manipulative director Jonathan Stryker, while Samantha Egger and Lynn Griffin anchor the cast of actresses caught in his twisted audition process. The film is remembered most for its chilling set pieces. A doll abandoned in the snow, a masked killer gliding across an ice rink, and dim stage lighting that turns the theater into a trap. The blend of theatrical ambition and slasher violence makes it feel both stylish and vicious. Though plagued by behind-the-scenes conflicts and uneven pacing, Curtains has earned cult status thanks to its unforgettable imagery and eerie atmosphere. It's a slasher that thrives on performance, deception, and the danger of ambition. Rituals, 1977. Five doctors set out on a wilderness trip in the remote Canadian bush, expecting a week of fishing, camping, and camaraderie. But as soon as they arrive, things begin to go wrong. Their boots vanish, strange traps appear, and it becomes clear that someone or something is stalking them. Cut off from civilization, the men find themselves hunted, forced to confront both the environment and their own unraveling psyches. Directed by Peter Carter, Rituals is often compared to Deliverance, but carves its own path through the survival horror subgenre. Hal Holbrook gives a commanding performance as Harry, the quiet leader of the group, while Lawrence Dane stands out as the abrasive Mitzi, whose bravado collapses as the situation grows more desperate. The film uses the unforgiving wilderness as both backdrop and weapon. Dense forests, rushing rivers, and hidden snares turn the doctor's supposed retreat into a waking nightmare. The sense of isolation is total, with every step deeper into the wild, drawing them closer to their pursuer. Bleak, tense, and relentless, Rituals has endured as one of the finest examples of Canadian horror. Its mix of character conflict and survival terror still resonates as a chilling reminder of how fragile civilization can be when nature and vengeance close in. The Resurrected, 1991. When a private investigator is hired by a worried wife to follow her reclusive husband, he uncovers more than marital secrets. The man, Charles Dexter Ward, has become obsessed with ancient texts and forbidden experiments, spending his nights in a remote farmhouse where terrible screams and strange smells drift into the air. What begins as a case of possible infidelity turns into a confrontation with forces beyond life and death. Directed by Dan O'Bannon, The Resurrected adapts H.P. Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward with a modern noir edge. John Terry plays investigator John March, while Jane Sibbett brings determination to the role of Claire Ward. Chris Sarandon delivers a standout dual performance as Charles and his sinister ancestor Joseph Kerwin, anchoring the film with intensity. The movie mixes detective story grit with gothic horror, blending shadowy investigations with grisly effects. Practical gore and twisted reanimations stand alongside themes of obsession and the dangers of tampering with forbidden knowledge. Though it never reached mainstream audiences, The Resurrected remains one of the most faithful and effective Lovecraft adaptations, fusing pulp detective thrills with supernatural dread in a way few films have managed. Deranged, 1974. In the quiet Midwest, a lonely man named Ezra Cobb lives under the shadow of his domineering mother. When she dies, Ezra cannot let go, literally. He exhumes her corpse, and soon begins a grotesque spree of grave robbing and murder, fashioning a macabre world from the remains of the dead. Directed by Alan Ormsby and Jeff Gillen, Deranged is loosely based on the crimes of Ed Gein, the same real-life killer who inspired Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Roberts Blossom delivers a haunting performance as Ezra, capturing both his childlike awkwardness and his descent into monstrous obsession. The film doesn't hold back on its grim details, using stark rural settings and practical effects to build an atmosphere of decay. The makeup, supervised by Tom Savini, is especially unsettling, giving the corpses a disturbingly lifelike presence. Unlike more sensationalized takes on the Gein story, Deranged plays almost like a grim docudrama, with a narrator guiding viewers through Ezra's crimes. This approach gives the film a chilling realism that makes it linger long after the credits roll. Often overshadowed by its more famous counterparts, Deranged remains one of the most disturbing and authentic interpretations of America's most infamous grave robber. Ghostkeeper, 1981. On a snowy winter trip, three friends veer off the beaten path and stumble upon a deserted lodge deep in the Canadian Rockies. Seeking shelter from the storm, they find the building isn't as empty as it looks. A mysterious woman lives there with her son, hiding a dark secret tied to the mountain and the ancient spirit that watches over it. Directed by Jim Makichuk, Ghostkeeper is a moody slice of Canadian horror that leans heavily into isolation and unease. Reva Spear stars as Jenny, whose suspicions grow as her companions vanish one by one, while Georgie Collins brings a chilling presence as the lodge's unsettling caretaker. The film thrives on its remote setting, with endless snowdrifts and abandoned hallways creating a creeping sense of entrapment. Long silences, strange rituals, and sudden bursts of violence make the lodge feel like a place where time has frozen, along with anyone unlucky enough to enter. Though made on a small budget, Ghostkeeper has gained a reputation as a haunting winter horror. It's the kind of movie that lingers not because of non-stop action, but because of its cold, eerie stillness. Blood and Donuts, 1995. In the middle of Toronto's neon-lit streets and late-night diners, a vampire awakens after decades of sleep. Rather than terrorizing the city, he's drawn to its quiet corners, befriending a cab driver and a donut shop waitress, while struggling with his thirst for blood. But his attempt at living on the margins of humanity doesn't go unnoticed, as old enemies and new dangers start closing in. Directed by Holly Dale, Blood and Donuts puts a quirky spin on vampire mythology. Gordon Curry plays Boya, the reluctant bloodsucker, while David Cronenberg makes a memorable appearance as a ruthless gangster. The film blends melancholy, romance, and dark humor, making it less about gothic castles and more about late-night loneliness. The visuals lean into dimly lit diners, urban back streets, and that feeling of a city half asleep, the perfect setting for a vampire who just wants to be left alone. It's a small, strange, and very Canadian take on the genre that gives its monster more heart than horror. While never a mainstream hit, Blood and Donuts has earned a reputation as one of the more unusual cult vampire films of the 1990s. The Incubus, 1982. A small town is shaken by a series of brutal attacks, each more inexplicable than the last. As the bodies mount, it becomes clear that the crimes aren't the work of any ordinary killer, but of a supernatural force, a demonic entity that preys on fear and flesh alike. Directed by John Howe, The Incubus adapts Ray Russell's chilling novel into a mix of psychological thriller and horror. John Cassavetes stars as Dr. Sam Cordell, the town's weary physician who becomes entangled in the investigation, while Carrie Keene plays his daughter, caught in the growing web of terror. Supporting roles from Helen Hughes and Duncan McIntosh add depth to the film's tightly knit community unraveling under the threat. The movie combines clinical detail with nightmarish imagery, using stark hospital rooms, shadowy streets, and sudden bursts of violence to unsettle the audience. There's an emphasis on dread over spectacle, with the true nature of the entity kept elusive until the harrowing conclusion. Though controversial for its disturbing subject matter, The Incubus stands out as one of the more unsettling Canadian horror entries of the early 80s, remembered for its unflinching tone and the gravitas Cassavetes brings to the role. Pin, 1988. Leon and Ursula grow up under the strict rule of their physician father, who teaches them life lessons through a medical dummy nicknamed Pin. To the children, Pin seems alive, speaking with their father's voice. But when tragedy strikes, Leon takes the illusion too far, convincing himself that Pin truly is a living companion, one who whispers advice, makes demands, and slowly takes control. Directed by Sandor Stern, Pin is a chilling Canadian psychological horror that blurs the line between childhood imagination and madness. David Hewlett delivers a haunting performance as Leon, while Cynthia Preston plays Ursula, the sister struggling to cope with her brother's unraveling mind. Terry O'Quinn also appears as the stern father whose lessons spark the obsession. The film thrives on quiet unease rather than overt gore, with Pin's eerily lifelike presence creating an atmosphere of constant discomfort. The sterile settings of doctors' offices and suburban homes only make the story more disturbing, showing horror lurking beneath everyday normalcy. Overlooked on release, Pin has since built a cult following, praised for its unsettling concept and Hewlett's intense portrayal. It's a unique entry in the 1980s horror. Disturbing, tragic, and impossible to forget once you've met Pin. The Carpenter, 1988. When a couple moves into a rundown house in need of major repairs, they hire help to restore it. But the man who shows up is no ordinary carpenter. He's the vengeful spirit of a former builder who was executed years earlier. Now, with hammer and saw in hand, he resumes his work, and anyone who gets in the way of his vision pays the price. Directed by David Wellington, the Carpenter blends supernatural horror with slasher elements. Wings Hauser takes on the title role, bringing both charm and menace to the ghostly handyman, while Lynn Adams plays the troubled wife who finds herself strangely drawn to him despite the carnage he leaves behind. The film delivers plenty of inventive kills, turning everyday tools into instruments of terror. Circular saws, nail guns, and power drills all become part of the Carpenter's grim craft. At the same time, the film explores themes of obsession and temptation as the line between attraction and danger blurs. Though not widely released outside video shelves, The Carpenter has earned cult status thanks to Hauser's intense performance and its mix of domestic drama with grisly supernatural violence. And that wraps up another look at Canada's hidden side of horror. These films might not have had huge budgets or wide releases, but they've survived through word of mouth, late-night airings, and worn-out VHS copies. Each one is a piece of Canada's horror legacy, and together they show just how much the genre has thrived outside the usual spotlight. For more discoveries like these, visit us at ejectvhs.com. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.